Hello there, this is Abhivardhan. We are live for an amazing session right now. We have actually a very interesting person when it comes to technology and entrepreneurship in India. And we thought that we should discuss about it considering the frugal and emerging role of technologies in India. So we came up with an idea to discuss about India Stack and the role of other frugal and emerging technologies. So we have a very amazing person with us who is Preethi Kasireddy. She's an entrepreneur. She is a developer. She also calls herself a teacher in the sense that she very well educates people about, I would say, how coding works and how should we understand emerging technologies like crypto. Uh, so I would also like to introduce my colleague who will be a co-moderator for this session, Simran. She is a law graduate as well as from the Indian Journal of AI and Law. So we are going to have an interactive discussion for sure, and the focus will be on how these things emerge, how India Stack is important for an emerging economy like India, and when it comes to India and the US, what intersectionality we see. So, to start with, I would have a very basic question, and the question would be in this form that we understand that COVID has changed our way of life, and it has in many ways changed the way we see technology. Now, we have been hearing the news that India is trying to ban the cryptocurrency per se, and we've also heard that we are in the case that, okay, fine, there are some people who are trying to work with DLT and other sort of decentralized form of technologies. How do you see the role of cryptocurrency in India, and if possible, if although it is just speculation right now, if we say that okay, cryptocurrency is very important, how do you see the role of DLT and other forms of blockchain which have emerged in the past 10 years per se? What do you think in the Indian context?
Yeah, my understanding of crypto in India is like, so I don't live in India, so I'm only observing from the outside, right? When I came to India in 2016, I was not that impressed by the scene in India because it felt like it was very much oriented around a lot of hype, not much innovation, very much like speculation type of driven interest, which is fine, but like it just felt very different from the innovation that was happening in Silicon Valley. And then when I came in 2020 again, I was kind of shocked because like it felt like all of a sudden the Indian entrepreneurs caught up to what was happening in Silicon Valley, and they were actually building like really cool and innovative technologies, and they kind of got it. They got the ethos of crypto, and they understood that it's a lot more than just about like speculating on Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever. Um, and so I think like one of the biggest uh, things that crypto gives India, just like it gives any other country or any other set of entrepreneurs, is that it gives them this tool set to innovate in their own country, right? And Indian entrepreneurs know their own market better than any other people know their own market. And I think India has its own very unique set of problems. And um, the often thing that crypto people say is like we want to bank the unbanked, and so countries like India are one of the top countries that have um, a lot of people who are underbanked or not properly banked and so forth. And so I think crypto could be a tool that is used to innovate and solve this problem specific to India. And I think like banning crypto would just like the argument for banning crypto is often that like it's like bad actors, like we want to prevent bad actors from using it for harmful things, whether that's like black money, right? We all know what black money is in India. We want to prevent that, but reality is fiat is used for just as fiat is almost like cash is just used for way more things in the black market than crypto is today. And so I don't think that's a fair argument because no matter what monetary system you have, there the black market is going to exist. And two, I think like by looking at crypto just as it is today, um, I think regulators are underestimating what the potential is. So they're looking at all the stuff that's happening today, and it's very much like a lot of it is kind of hype driven, and it's like there's like like some of it, you can look at something and I can understand why someone would be like, this is just like a bunch of people trying to make money, right? Or a bunch of people trying to scam people, or just like, some of it just seems so outlandish. And that's fair. And I totally agree that, like, yeah, none of it is actually being used in the real world today. But we have to go through this like growing pain of allowing this experimentation before we can actually for us to figure out like what are the real use cases. Because if we don't allow any experimentation, then like we have no idea like what it could actually be used for. And so it's through these like mistakes, like entrepreneurs need to like experiment and run these experiments, make mistakes and learn, and then we can figure out what the real use cases are and what problems they can solve. And in relation to DLT, I think like India has like the whole blockchain, not Bitcoin uh, ethos, at least the regulators do. And I kind of understand where they're coming from, but uh, I think they kind of missed the point of crypto in the sense that what it really does is like without the is it blockchain, not Bitcoin? Is that what it is?
I
Yeah,
believe yes. For
yeah,
now, they are banning the cryptocurrency. Yeah, they are only
yeah,
for the
and
currency.
yeah. So like they want like I've heard a lot of people say that like the government just wants like DLT and they don't want the cryptocurrency. And I get what they're coming from, but like they kind of miss the point of crypto, because the point is that you can build a system and align different stakeholders in the system using some kind of currency. And if you take out that currency, then it doesn't become about aligning different stakeholders. It just becomes about storing data in a very open way, which is valuable, sure. I think that's a good first step to improving how we maintain our our systems in general. But that's honestly like a minor improvement, whereas like using crypto is sort of like just a whole different paradigm and way of thinking about how to um, design these systems. So I just think it's like it comes from a misunderstanding of like the whole point of cryptocurrency.
Well, that's interesting because, I think the distributed ledger, which is the basis of blockchain, which everybody talks about, also is connected with the idea of trust. So when you have this something which is decentralized, it actually accords to things in a much wider way. So since we are discussing DLT, I would like to enlighten and would like to proceed with a follow up. So we know that COVID is still there. The pandemic is not going to end very soon. And when this all started in India, one interesting thing was that various aspects, or I would say various byproducts of India Stack came into forth, and they actually started helping people in the best way possible. Obviously, we know that KYC, UPI, and all of those are a part of it. So, what can be said for now is that these frugal services and platforms which have been developed through India Stack have been quite useful for the common people, and it has been quite interesting because they are very frugal, they are very cost effective, and they actually work pretty well. People also argue that the NPCI's UPI is very much a world class infrastructure. So if we say that India wishes to inspire people and it could be put into use, what do you think? And what inspirations can be taken from India, and how can Indian companies contribute? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think India definitely. Um, I think people underestimate the how innovative and impressive the execution on UPI is, because there's nothing like that in the US even, right? Like we're still stuck on like payment processors and credit cards and the old school way of doing it. Like we don't have a way to have a universal payment interface. Like that's just not something here. So um, one, I think is like I think I think like first India has to make it super successful in India itself. And I know it's definitely becoming successful. I've seen the growth charts of the UPI and the adoption and stuff. It's growing like crazy. Um, Two, I think India has to prove to itself like what value is going to be generated through these systems. And then if for example India's GDP grows significantly because of something like UPI, then other countries will naturally see that an updated payment infrastructure really helps with the economy and the growth, and they'll want to sort of copy it, in my opinion. And so um, I think India doesn't really necessarily have to go out and like try to shove this into other people's faces. It just has to prove that like this works, and it is generating value for the society, and then other people will naturally want to copy, right? Like if something's working for a country, then other people are going to come in and copy. It's like, you know, in the last like 50 years, the East, like countries like India, were very much copying the West in terms of everything, right? Cell phones, internet, technology. And so now, like, India has a chance to be the one that's leading the way, and other people sort of copy what they're doing.
That's nice because I think this has been after the 1991 reforms, and we have started, inspiring ourselves much from the American tech. I would say American entertainment and many aspects of American society. So let's have a follow up on that. Um, I'd like to highlight about the economic situation of the US when it comes to disruptive tech. Now, obviously, blockchain is one of them, AI is one of them, IoT is also known as one of them. Disruptive tech. Often, people have argued that the sort of disruptive tech which is put into use, and again, I definitely understand the point that crypto has its own value, but let's leave crypto for a while. Let's understand the other forms of tech which are also there. The case people sometimes say that America has a big problem. That okay, fine, they have technologies, but the companies who are employing those technologies usually affect the status quo of the economy, and actually that affects people in many regards. I think that has already affected successive governments, be it whosoever the president, and already when it comes to big tech and per se, questions are being raised even in India and other countries how to deal with it. Now, why am I concerned with this question is because we often inspire our technology growth and the way our economy grows, for say, by the Western models. I would say much of them by the American models, some of them by the Europeans and so forth. Obviously, there will be some sort of, I'm not saying it will be, but who knows, there will be some sort of big tech kind of thing happening in India. We already see companies like Ola, we already see companies like Make My Trip and all these already doing well. If that happens, obviously an issue of regulation comes in. But from the United States, what India should learn not to repeat the mistakes and per se obviously have a culture of innovation, which we already have. So, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think like, you know, the model of Silicon Valley is interesting, right? Like Silicon Valley figured out how to innovate in a very specific way. So it was always about um, like like you're trying to change the world. You're trying to build like the biggest thing possible. Like, and I think that mentality. I think the pendulum is going to swing slightly the other way. I think we're not going to see these. I don't know if that's going to be the model of the future. I don't know if India should be striving to build like the next Apple or the next Google. I don't think that's like, again, like that's like just simply copying. Um, I think like there's a lot to learn from Silicon Valley. Like one is like the VC industry in Silicon Valley is incentivized to make these companies get as big as possible because like that's how they generate returns for these funds. And as a result, that's fine, but it skews a lot of incentives along the way because entrepreneurs are driven purely by the valuation of these companies rather than are they actually doing something good? Are they doing something productive? And if even if a company is doing something really good and it doesn't have a high valuation, it's not like considered like a Silicon Valley like darling company. And so I think as the power of Silicon Valley starts to like slowly wane because like other cities come up, I think India can just like create its own model of innovation that suits its own environment. I think, like I said earlier, like India's problems are so unique. Um, so like what I see happening in India now is like, okay, like we're just gonna build the next unicorn, and like we're gonna like and and like I don't know if that's the right goal. Like why are we just trying to build unicorns? Why don't we just think about like why is it always about valuation, right? Like why not think about like like find other ways to measure success. I think like that's where a lot of the modern everything about the way we measure modern value creation is kind of skewed because it's measured by like GDP and valuations, especially in Silicon Valley. And I'm not sure if valuations and GDP specifically are perfect measures for innovation. I think we need new measures for how to actually like figure out like are we actually doing something meaningful here, or are we just like moving numbers up the chart, right? Those are financial innovation and like real innovation or product innovation are very, very different things. Sometimes they align. Sometimes financial innovation is a reflection of product innovation, but oftentimes they can diverge. So I think India should really think about this from a first principles point of view rather than just try to copy Silicon Valley, because that's kind of what I see happening right now.
That's a very interesting point made. If I may add something, that generally is a phenomena, and I think we need to see. I believe there are already some knockoffs of the American companies and American startups, whatsoever app they create or whatsoever services they have. Recently, we just had a spat between the government of India and their parliamentary committee and the great Twitter. And then what happened was that already two apps were built, I think last year only, as alternatives to Twitter. One of them is known as Koo by Vocal, and one of them, which we know, is Tutor. So it's like nearly kind of a copy of Twitter. When it comes to competition now, generally the founders of Koo and generally the founders of Tutor are very hopeful that yes, something might happen and people might be shifting, because news came that while I think I may be wrong in the statistic, but still I'm assuming, I think because I checked last time, maybe a week ago, that nearly 15 to 16 million users from India are in Twitter. So it's like in the Koo app, nearly 5 to 6 million or 5.6 million somehow people joined Koo after that spat happened, after whatever happened in 26 January, post that, because it was a political move. So in that case, do you see knockoffs? Because I think we have been discussing about this copying issue for a good deal. Can you highlight, if you wish to, can you highlight some good examples? Like what are those unique forms of tech which work? And since already we have knockoffs like Koo and Tutor, obviously in the case of social media, do you think they work out, or it's like they're copying or kind of internalizing the same sort of market which is there? Because I believe the Indian not many of the Indian people are still exposed to internet, in the sense that the sort of technologies which are part of their lives. Still not many people know about Amazon, where I think it's in the top 10 cities or some of the towns per se, but I think that is democratizing, because Amazon claims that they have 10 million users in India. So I mean, that's very less value. India is a big population. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think like it's very contextual. Some copycats do work if the model is very obvious. Like copycats to Uber obviously worked, right? So it's not like companies like Ola, is it Ola? Is it the cab company? I forget. Like all of
Yeah,
yeah,
Ola.
yeah. There's like 1,500 variations of Uber basically, and like they all worked because it just make the business model makes so much sense. Um, in the case of something like Twitter, I think that's a little bit odd because um, first, like Indians are already on Twitter, so like why do we need the Indian version of Twitter? Um, and then two, I just I just I don't know, like it's like that's very much like it's not like really. I don't know what it would do, what is different about it to make it so that like it suits specifically Indians or something. I don't know if there's something special there where they're like designing it to suit the Indian market, but it would really depend on the thing. But my gut says like that's probably not like the right way to innovate. Because like even if it does get traction, right? It's like, okay, great. So you just took maybe a little bit of market share from Twitter, right? But did you really create new markets, or did you like really create new innovation? Probably not. So like thinking about it from that angle really helps. And like I think as an entrepreneur, like people sometimes just they just either sometimes some entrepreneurs just want to make money or they want to get high valuations, and they're like, okay, this already works, so I'm just going to copy it. And whereas like other entrepreneurs who are more like first principle thinkers want to try to solve like new problems that haven't been solved. And I think that's where like innovation is very interesting, where you're solving unexplored problems. And the reality is it's a lot scarier because like no one's tackled these things. And but like the other good thing is like the competition is a lot lower, right? So I think there's pros and cons. And like India, like I said earlier, like it has its own very unique specific problems. Like India is just like such a different country from like every other country in the world, and the problems are very unique to the Indian market. And like as an entrepreneur, if I were an entrepreneur there, I'd just like focus on India because it's just so novel. And why would you want to just copy something from someone else when you can solve like very, very unique and novel problems?
That sounds quite enthusing. So let's shift some perspective here. Recently, we know that the US-China trade war is still undergoing. I mean, it has not ended technically, despite whatsoever the government is. And countries like India, countries in Africa, some countries in Europe also have tried to benefit from the US-China trade war. But I think mostly the global South countries have benefited. Um, Now, it is proposed by, and I would be very happy to name the person. So, in a near conference, Balaji Srinivasan actually suggested that since this trade war thing is already going on and it's not going to stop just because somebody is in power or not, countries like India would be having a good deal of benefit. Now, often in the case of AI, for example, our Niti Aayog says that India can be a garage sort of for the emerging economies in Africa and all those countries. So, as we know that uniqueness is there in the problems, and per se, obviously copycat issues are there, but apart from that, there are people who are working uniquely. How do we see India forming a kind of a, although it is his suggestion, he said that India should have a neutral protocol. Very typically, he said a neutral crypto protocol. So if you see in that way that, okay, fine, there are two competitors who are already there on their way when it comes
Yep.
to technology leadership. India's trying to make their own frontier and trying to be a neutral protocol. How do we see it if it happens, and can we see some signs of it? What do you think about it?
I'm not sure what he meant by neutral protocol. I didn't listen to the talk, so
No issue, no issues. I think what he meant was neutral crypto protocol. The idea that it's too decentralized and it's a neutral platform that not affected by powers per se. So in that sense, he must have meant. That's why because he mentioned crypto in that, and we thought it would be reasonable. So
yeah, it's hard for me to comment because I don't know what he means by neutral crypto. I think he's been very pro crypto for India and trying to push it, um, and I think that's good. I just don't know what he means by neutral. I'd have to listen to the actual conversation to understand and answer that question.
that's not a problem. So as we are coming to the conclusion very soon, uh, I would like to discuss about a bit of how uh, will be the scene for countries like the United States when it comes to cooperation with India on technology. Now, I'm not asking on a diplomatic or all that aspect. I'm asking on the way users and companies in America see India. Uh, in the case of technologies like AI, in the case of technologies like crypto. Now, one thing is for sure that we actually have started with crypto in India stack per se, but I think we shifted to some other aspects as well. But if we say, fine, yes, it is inspiring, it works, it helps out, uh, how should the American market see to it, and how should the American people see to it? How much can they inspire? And maybe we can discuss some aspects of it, and maybe we can conclude.
Cool. So I guess like if I understand the correct question correctly, you're trying to ask like how do Americans see India in terms of their innovation? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Um, it depends on. I think like if I had to be totally honest, like most Americans, at least until before 2020, were very like if you live in America, you kind of just think America is the world, right? Like um, America was the number one country in the world, and so you don't. A lot of Americans, if I had to be totally honest, are kind of ignorant of what's happening in other countries. Not everyone, obviously, but a lot are, and so especially for a country like India, like most people still have the perception that India is a third world country, and they don't realize that like there's a lot happening in India because frankly like even though there's a lot happening in India, the media doesn't really do a great job of actually not that the media doesn't do a great job, but like India is just such a like insular country, right? Like it's always been very insular in that regard, and so like the um, news about Indian innovation doesn't really make it out to the West. And so people here don't honestly know about it unless like someone has boots on the ground and they're actually like going in India and seeing what's happening, and bringing that knowledge back to the US. Like there's no way that that knowledge comes to the US. Luckily, because of places like Twitter, we're starting to see people start to surface what's happening in India, and then people here are starting to recognize that India, for example, with India Stack, is really ahead of the game, and they're starting to appreciate it a lot more. But like, I've had conversations with people in crypto about like my excitement for India and its potential to really adopt crypto. And they kind of shrugged their shoulders at me because they thought that like India will never adopt crypto because the regulation in the government there is just too unpredictable, too flaky, etc. And so there's a lot of like negative perceptions about how incompetent the government is, or how third world India is. And I think the only way to, I guess, like remove those negative perceptions is for India to kind of charge ahead and prove its own prosperity in the next decade or two through through innovation. And then as they innovate, like the media will start to recognize it and talk about it, and that's how they build stories in people's heads that like, okay, India is not a third world country anymore, it's actually a very like forward thinking, innovative country.
That's a very nice thing to say per se, and I think we can end uh, at this note, and maybe in our future discussions we can discuss something else, and we can come up with some very much interesting topic per se. So
Okay.
yeah, so I'd like to thank Preethi to come in for the session. I think we just had a discussion and we had decided on a short notice, but then we thought, okay, let's extend it and then have it. I would also like to thank Simran for helping me in the questions per se, and for her suggestions. And we would come with another
I
episode
would
of AI Now.
actually like to
Yeah,
gather some
sure,
last comments from Preeti ma'am,
please. Yeah.
which is about like recently the Indian government came with some guidelines about artificial intelligence sector wise, and they're pretty it's a very new concept, because we always need a framework of governing anything that is manifested into artificial intelligence. Like we have now a data privacy law that's soon going to become a law, and that's going to work in tandem with companies and other all the entities that come under it. So artificial intelligence per se, when it interjects into sectors like education sector or health sector, what do you think will be the immediate challenges for us in terms of accessibility, in terms of increasing efficiency, and do you think we can steer towards making this to be a true success as far as achieving or attaining what artificial intelligence can do to revamp the already like infrastructure and the working of the sectors? Thank you.
So I don't know much about the artificial intelligence, what's happening in India with that regard. I'd guess that the problems that they're facing or the challenges that they're facing with AI are not dissimilar to what's happening in the US. I agree, things like the ethics of AI and all that are still completely unanswered questions. And even people in the US have not figured out how to build ethical AI and make sure that when AI does get rolled out, it actually benefits society more than it harms society. Um, and so I think this is an area where something like AI is very like I said earlier, crypto was a very I was like, okay, you should focus on problems specific to India. But with AI, I think it's one of those things where it's like we need countries all around the world to come together to figure out how to build ethical AI and how to overcome these challenges. So I think one thing that India could really do is work with entrepreneurs all around the world or AI researchers all around the world to make sure that they're in the rooms that these other AI researchers are in and talking about the same problems. I'm not sure if that's
Great.
happening already or not, but just off the top of my tongue.
Not a problem. That's nice. Great. So I think we can definitely take a good turn to end now. And I would again thank Preethi and Simran for the discussion. And maybe in future we would be coming up
Yeah,
with some
thank you
new
so
topics.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and in the coming season we would be discussing shortly.
Okay.
So I thank all for the session. And yes, people can binge watches, and people can follow Preethi on Twitter at the rate I am underscore Preethi. They can also follow iSail at the rate Indian Society AI. And then maybe we would come with a new discussion. So just hang it on Twitter and LinkedIn on all the portals. Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye.